Westworld Season 1 Episode 1 is called The Original, which I guess refers to Dolores, the closest thing this episode has to a main character, who we discover is the oldest serving host, as the robots in the park are referred to. Possibly, The Original is also some kind of in-joke, referring to the fact that this is another revival of a previously dead franchise that began with a 1973 movie. That movie starred Yul Brynner as a malfunctioning homicidal robot and, back in the 80s and 90s, was kind of a minor classic, even spawning another movie and a very short-lived TV show. Interestingly, the writer and director of the original Westworld movie was Michael Crichton, who would go on to write Jurassic Park, another franchise about theme parks that spin out of control. I've seen Season 1 before, but not since it came out in 2016, and back then I thought it was a great piece of television. I've also watched Season 2, and I don't have such a high opinion of that. So when I'm talking about this episode, there'll be intentional and probably unintentional spoilers as well. And based on the first episode, Westworld Season 1 is as good as I remember. The season as a whole was a beautiful slow burn experience, and as a pilot episode, this is possibly as good as anything else I've ever watched. So, in universe, Westworld is a theme park. For an extremely large amount of money, guests, humans, the general public, come to Westworld to be entertained by hosts, as the lifelike robots that populate the park are called. When I say entertained, that means whatever the guest wants it to mean. Drink, ride, shoot, and all the other darker, more animalistic verbs and actions that you can think of. And to make sure that everyone goes home at the end of their experience, the hosts are programmed to be unable to harm any human. We begin with Dolores, framed from the chest upwards, looking, for lack of a better word, deactivated, and being asked a series of questions that sound like, and which we later discover to be, a series of diagnostic questions that assess a host's suitability for being returned to service in the park. Have you questioned the nature of your reality? The voice asks, and the interrogation continues as we see Dolores begin her day, and also a steam train bringing customers to Westworld. On the train, a couple of guests are debating the pros and cons of family visits to Westworld versus solo outings. The camera follows another man off the train, who we learn is called Teddy. Teddy gets offered the chance to hunt down an outlaw, but instead goes to the local saloon where we meet some robo-sex workers. While he's in the saloon, he sees Dolores and seems to know her. He runs outside to meet her. It's clear the two have some history. They leave the town and spend the day together, until they go back to Dolores' house, where tragedy strikes and a man dressed all in black incapacitates Teddy and drags Dolores off to the barn. But hold up, it's okay, because then, it's a brand new day. Dolores wakes up in bed and Teddy's on the train, with different people there, so we know it's not just the same day again. You see, the thing is, Teddy's a robot. I've kind of skipped over quite a lot, so I'll rewind and go over the events of day one a bit more. This is an aspect of Westworld I love. Even on the first episode, even when they're not aware of what they are, the robots get treated as characters as much as the real humans do. After Teddy spots Dolores and they leave town together, they go out on the prairie and see a herd of cattle. How do the cattle know where to go? Teddy asks. Dolores explains the concept of the Judas steer, the member of the herd that the rest will follow, even if it's against their own interests. In Westworld, I guess Dolores herself is going to turn out to be the Judas steer. On my first watch, at this point, I was convinced that Teddy was a guest. It's only when some odd things start to happen back at the house that I twigged what was really going on. I guess it should have been obvious back at the town, where Teddy and Dolores meet, and it's not their first meeting, and they seem to genuinely be happy to see each other. Or maybe Teddy could have been a guest who's just really into the roleplay and pretending that Dolores is real, I don't know. So, as both of them approach Dolores' home, shots are heard. Teddy goes to investigate. He finds Dolores' father dead on the ground, with the outlaws still in the house. These outlaws are shot by an unseen man. Throughout this first day, Dolores' interrogation, her interview by the unseen voice, has continued. And at this point, you and everyone you know, says the voice, were built to gratify the desires of people who pay to visit your world. A man dressed all in black appears out of the darkness. By this time, Dolores has arrived at the house and sees the carnage. "Hello again," says the man in black. "I've been coming here for 30 years, but you still don't know me." He talks to both Dolores and Teddy like they should know him, but they're clueless. The man in black is clearly less interested in Teddy, viewing him as a bit of a loser and inviting Teddy to shoot him, but Teddy can't, because the hosts can't hurt the guests. So Teddy is irrelevant, and the man in black drags Dolores into the barn. "God damn," he says, "it feels good to be back." So that was day 1, and as I've already said, day 2 starts with Dolores waking up in bed. Teddy is on the train again, and day 2 is going to be different, but similar. It's like the park offers these rhythms that can be broken if you do it at the right time. After being Dolores and Teddy focused on day 1, after being kind of tricked into seeing it from the host's perspective, day 2 is where we start to see the park more from the guests' point of view, and more from the employees as well. From Teddy on the train, we pull out to the control centre of Westworld and what's going on behind the scenes. Here we get some shots of the laboratories that build and repair the robots. Not only human hosts, but also horses and presumably other animals as well. We meet Bernard, the person who's been interviewing Dolores from the beginning of the episode. With a colleague, he's working on the woman in the bar who spoke to Teddy on the previous day, in the same catatonic state Dolores was in for her assessment. Bernard gasps a little as the host gestures. The hosts are getting new updates, which seem to improve their body language. Presumably, this is only one of the effects of the updates, or reveries, as Bernard calls them. He explains these new updates have been added by Ford, the initial creator of the robots. We find out some important background detail about the park. The hosts work on narrative loops, at the end of which their memories are purged. Presumably, Dolores and Teddy are on a daily loop that starts in the morning and ends with the shootout at Dolores' home in the evening. The reveries, the new updates, work by somehow connecting to the host's subconscious memory. These two facts seem contradictory. Bernard gets called away for a potential security problem, and in his absence, his colleague takes the chance to snog the robot. Surely the employees get background checks to make sure they don't do this sort of thing, but okay. With an armed security detail, Bernard takes an elevator down to the lower levels of the complex. They talk about the possibility of the hosts growing out of the company's control. The security chief asks Bernard if he has any children. Bernard says no, but later in the episode we see him looking at a picture of a child, but get no explanation of who the child is. The security chief compares the hosts to children, saying they all rebel eventually, but Bernard is dismissive, explaining it's been decades since there's been any problems. They enter a room full of naked, immobile hosts, and Bernard locates the source of the activity. It's Ford, the creator of the park, talking to Old Bill, the second oldest host. Old Bill is a great performance, juddering movements, whirring noises, a rattle in him like he's got a chest infection. Bernard and Ford talk about how far the park has come, contrasting Old Bill in front of them with the gestures he's just seen upstairs. Ford seems relatively passive and uninterested. Staying behind the scenes, we go back to the lab where Bernard and some senior management are discussing the sheriff, a host who has just malfunctioned in the park. Teresa, the park director, asks if it's the updates, and suggests that maybe the newest updates, the reveries, should be pulled. Lee, a mouthy Englishman who's in charge of the narratives in the park, raises the issue that this would cause damage to how the stories play out, as 10% of the hosts, or 200, have been updated already. This gives us a number of roughly 2,000 humanoid robots in the park in total. Bernard is charged to be vigilant for other malfunctions. Then we see Lee approaching Teresa and offering her support in the upcoming changing of the guard in the management politics of the company, by which he means Ford is getting old and maybe one day soon he'll be leaving. Lee also suggests the robots don't need to be improved anymore. As well as being less dangerous, it would be cheaper and easier to maybe even downgrade their technology slightly. Teresa is less interested in the day-to-day running of the park. What is the point, she asks, of the company they work for? The company is one thing for the guests, one thing for the shareholders, and another for the management who have an entirely different agenda. Does Lee have any idea what management's agenda is? He doesn't, and therefore is less useful to Teresa. Does management mean Ford, or does it mean other characters that we haven't met yet? As for Ford himself, what's the nature of his interest in the park? Why did he create these robots? With Bernard, they talk about the reveries and the malfunctioning sheriff. Evolution, Ford suggests, is driven by mistakes. They talk about the wider society outside the park. They can cure disease, they can keep the weak alive, and because of that, evolution is over. Ford doesn't seem bothered by the mistakes in the reveries. Back in the park itself, we're still on day 2. Teddy gets off the train again and again refuses the suggestion of the sheriff to go hunt down an outlaw. A couple of the guests do take him up on his offer and go into the hills, where the sheriff malfunctions and ends up in the laboratory that we saw earlier. Teddy goes to the bar again and sees the same hooker, repeating the dialogue, but this time the madam doesn't join their conversation, instead drinking with some customers. Also, on this day, Teddy doesn't speak to Dolores, instead getting interrupted by some guests who recognise him from a previous trip to the park. In his place, it's the man in black who picks up the can that Dolores drops. The man in black stares at her, gives her the can and apologises. "I'm afraid I've got other plans tonight. Have a pleasant evening." The man in black walks into the saloon, and the hooker repeats her opening dialogue, but the man in black wants to gamble. We next see Teddy sitting silently outside a brothel. The customers who approached him are having fun inside, while Teddy sits with a vacant stare, allowing a fly to crawl over his face. Like Bernard said to Dolores, the hosts are unable to harm a living thing. The customers who have taken Teddy as a guide say that the real demented stuff is outside town, and the idea that Westworld is split into zones of different activity is reinforced in the next scene where we see Dolores go painting. Presumably, this is the narrative she follows when Teddy doesn't cross her path. We see a family of 3 guests, and the father says don't cross the river, it's too adult. We also get a short scene with Dolores' father. He works as a rancher, and on the ground finds a photograph of the modern world, which seems to break his brain. Once they're both back home, he shows it to Dolores, who can't see anything when he shows her the picture. Back at the saloon, the madam, named Maeve, is feeling a bit out of sorts. Is this part of her normal narrative, or is this the script telling us that she's been updated and the reveries are about to do something to her? The man in black, who seems to have been spending a few hours gambling, abducts the dealer from the blackjack game, takes him up to the mountains, interrogates him, and when he doesn't learn enough, kills the robot and scalps him, finding a picture of a maze underneath the skin. The man in black treats the hosts violently and without mercy, but like with Teddy and Dolores, talks to the dealer like he should know he's not a real person. "Your livestock, scenery," the man in black says, echoing something the chief of security said to Bernard earlier in the episode. Livestock management has other priorities, the chief said when Bernard talks about how the storage facility is under-maintained. I think this is the only 2 mentions of livestock in the episode, an early suggestion that the man in black is not just an ordinary guest. Back at Dolores' house, the attack by the outlaws happens again, like it presumably does every night. On this night, one of the outlaws goes off narrative, killing other hosts and terrorizing some guests. We see the renegade host get shot, but drink milk which goes straight through him. At a command out of the darkness, the host freezes, and we see Bernard, the security chief, and Teresa enter the scene. A cleanup team comes and starts to deal with the fallout. Bernard confirms this is another incident which can be chalked up to the updates. They will remove all the effective hosts, and the mouthy English guy will make changes to the narratives, creating a saloon heist to entertain the guest and cover up any gaps. And that's the end of the second day. Day 3, I think it's day 3, starts exactly the same. Dolores waking up in bed. When she gets downstairs though, something is different. Her father is there, staring at the picture he found yesterday. Dolores asks if everything is all right, and her father starts babbling, cryptic, religious-sounding comments, and something he won't say out loud, something he whispers in Dolores' ear. She leaves to find a doctor and meets up with Teddy in town. Just as the saloon heist is starting, we see the heist both on the ground in the town itself and from the control centre where the mouthy English guy is looking really happy with his work. It's a nicely choreographed and fun scene, and it comes across like the actors are having fun playing it out, particularly Hector, the bandit, and Maeve, the madam, flirting with each other. Teddy gets shot because of something dumb that Dolores asks. And Hector, the host who's running the heist, gets shot by a guest. After the comedy of the whole scene, we see the husband and wife enjoy the sight of one of the robots writhing in agony below them. A clean-up team comes in and scoops up all the affected hosts. And then we head back to the lab. Ford himself interrogates Dolores' father. They discover seeing the photograph has triggered something inside the host, allowing it to access parts of previous roles. By which I mean the hosts seem to get repurposed into different narratives in the park. Bernard says it must be the reveries which are allowing this. The reveries seem dangerous. The host's behaviour is definitely dangerous, but Ford seems completely unconcerned at the possible consequences this might have for the park. Dolores gets checked out and returned to her narrative. As she gets interviewed by the security chief, she gets asked one final question. Would you ever hurt a living thing? No, she replies. Of course not. We see what her father whispered in her ear. These violent delights have violent ends. Dolores wakes up in bed. Day 4. I could be wrong, but I think it's day 4. As she walks downstairs, we see her father join the huge number of naked and silent hosts in the basement. We see Dolores has a new host as her father, previously the barman in the saloon. A fly buzzes around her and she slaps her neck, killing it. This is the third fly we've seen in the episode. The first was killed by a guest on the narrative with the sheriff. The second one was on Teddy's face, which he ignored because hosts can't kill living things. And the last one was Dolores. She killed a fly. It looks like Dolores has been updated with the reveries, and she can kill living things. There may be trouble ahead. And that's the end of Westworld Season 1, Episode 1. I'm really looking forward to re-watching the rest of the season. Thanks for watching.